Hi folks, here's something I was thinking about um, putting on the Greek midterm this quarter as a kind of a joke, just to see what y'all can do with it. And then I thought, well, you have enough to worry about, and that's kind of sadistic. But what exactly is it? Looks Greek. Is it Greek? Well, that's what I'm going to be talking about today on Santa Cruz County's #1 Google Slides, not live broadcast. Talking about the Amazing Finz-Lad, Finzo-Lado, because that is what this is the story of. It is the story of the Amazing Finzo-Lado, who got into a fight with a guy named Pap. And so it happened that I, Pap, had a dispute and a lawsuit with you, Kenag, and with you, Moyan, and with you, Finz-Lad, and we made a statement in the presence of Sor, the leader of the people of Wallach, and our claim and dispute was given up, and I gave an understanding in the following terms. I and my descendants won't fight with you and your descendants anymore. So, Finz-Lad, Finzo-Lado, he got into a fight with Pap, and they made a contract to end it, and that's what we have here. Now, this document doesn't go into all that many details about what kind of a fight it was, but there is another document that we have about a fight between Yobig and some other people, where it specified that it's a sword fight. One guy chopped the brother of another guy with a sword, not fatally apparently, and then they made a contract to kind of resolve it. That's how they dealt with the situation. Contract as a way of resolving assault and battery, attempted murder. If that sounds weird to you, it is, and I'm going to talk about that more in a minute. But first, what is going on with this apparent Greek? Greek in which you would be lucky to recognize even a single word which you know from Greek, and probably not even one, and the endings certainly do not look Greek. What's up with this? Well, the trick is that it's not Greek at all, it's Bactrian. Bactrian is an ancient and medieval language written in the Greek script, probably from the 2nd to the 9th centuries CE. Closely related to Persian, Middle Persian, to Sogdian, some of the other Persian languages in that area, and written in the Greek alphabet, like I was saying. Now that's unusual. The Greek alphabet all the way over there. How did that come about? When I say all the way over there, I mean Bactria. Bactria is in modern-day Afghanistan. It's very far from Greece. So we're not talking about a situation like Coptic or Nubian, which are other languages that I've talked about on here, where the Greek alphabet sort of gets transmitted by way of the Roman Empire to places on its borders or within its borders. Because Afghanistan is very far from the Roman Empire, it's very far from any place that is ruled by Greeks, at least as we usually think about it. So usually it's first mentioned, actually, historically, as Bactria, in Old Persian, in the Histon inscription, in the list of places that the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Achaemenid Empire, had under its control or sovereignty. And as you probably know, Alexander the Great conquered the Achaemenid Empire and took control over it in about 330 BCE. Now, Alexander went a bit past that even. He made it all the way to India. But Bactria and the region around there are kind of the last places that he founded colonies, settled Greek people in those areas. Alexandria Eskate, which means the last Alexandria, the ultimate Alexandria, is a little bit to the north of the borders of historical Bactria, but there's another Alexandria on the Oxus, which is the second to last Alexandria, basically going east, which is in Bactria. And that's how the Greek gets in here, via Alexander the Great, via the Macedonians, via his soldiers and other Greek colonists. Because these towns, Alexandria, wherever they are settled by soldiers from Alexander the Great's army, veterans of the army. And other towns in conquered territory were also kind of taken over or settled by Alexander's soldiers, founding colonies. Now, after the conquests of Alexandria, his empire, as you may know, split up, was ruled over by several what are called diadochoi, or successor kings. The one that ruled over Bactria, that ended up ruling over Bactria, was the Seleucids. And they were not good at holding territory. They are mostly famous in ancient historiography for just losing fucking everything. Keep losing it. They lost Parthia first, but they lost Bactria about a century, less than a century after the dynasty had been founded. Very early lost to them. Now given that, and given that there's a lot of places that used to be ruled by the Seleucids where nobody ever used Greek script after they disappeared, you have to wonder, what was so special about Bactria? Parthia didn't use the Greek script. The Near East did not use the Greek script. India and territories in India outside of Bactria did not use the Greek script. What's so special about Bactria that led it to continue using the Greek script for like 1,000 years after the Seleucids had gotten kicked out? Well, there are a few reasons. One of which is that Bactria did not, prior to this point, have a written tradition or a script in the way that the Near Eastern kingdoms did, for sure, a very old written tradition. But that's not the whole story either, right? Because Parthia, as well, did not have a written tradition of its own, except to the extent that Old Persian sort of was the written tradition of the Persian Empire. But basically nobody remembered how that script worked after the Achaemenids fell. So perhaps the deeper reason why Bactria continues to use the Greek script, and actually the Greek language for a considerable length of time after it becomes independent, has to do with the troubles later history of that region, because everyone's always trying to conquer it. Everyone's going after Bactria. You got the Tocharians, actually, who've conquered it at a certain point, but the Parthians and the Sasanians, these other Persian dynasties in particular, keep going after it, because historically, like I said at the outset, Bactria is part of the Achaemenid Empire, the Persian Empire. Now, the Bactrian, the indigenous Bactrian rulers, and some Bactrian rulers who claimed descent from Greek governors, kept trying to get independence, territorial sovereignty of their own, sometimes successfully. And when they did, they tended to mint coins. That's one way of asserting independence. Another way of asserting independence is by using a script and a language of your own that is unique to you in the region, and for the Bactrians, that's Greek. Like I said, they used the Greek language itself with the Greek script for a while, on coins. Here's one that belongs to King Demetrius, I think the third, of the Greco-Bactrian kingdom. And you can read it in Greek. It says Demetriou Basileia, plus some sigils of various kinds. There's some Greek symbolism on this coin. On the back of the coin, the part that's written on, there's a strange-looking kind of a Heracles, right? You can recognize via the iconography. There's the lion skin, there's the club. And on the front of the coin, a portrait of Demetrius in Greek style, wearing an elephant hat. Why on earth? Elephants are symbols of Seleucid rule. So Demetrius is kind of advertising himself as like an outpost of the Seleucids in Bactria, as a way of differentiating his kingdom from the nearby Persian empires that had kind of an empire ambition to incorporate Bactria. So the language continues to get used on coins and in an administrative function as well for quite a while, but as a spoken language it seems to have died out fairly early. And by the turn of the millennium, by the beginning of the Common Era, nobody in Bactria speaks Greek anymore. So somebody has this brilliant idea. King Kanishka has this brilliant idea to use the Greek script to write the language that people actually speak, which is Bactrian. This changeover happens in the 2nd century CE, and we even have the inscription that records it. You're going to have to trust me on this, because I could not find a high-quality picture of it. But among the other things included in this, what's called the Rabatak inscription, is a statement that King Kanishka changed over from Greek to Bactrian as an administrative language. Bactrian, which was written in the Greek script. So that's how the Greek script ends up getting appropriated to write the Bactrian language. And the fit is pretty good. It's an alphabetic script. That means you can apply it fairly flexibly to write other languages, provided that the phonetic inventory of the language is about as big as the phonetic inventory of Greek, which for Bactrian is roughly the case. They only have to add one other letter. It's a sh sound, and it looks kind of like a thorn in Old English. But there are still some idiosyncrasies. The weirdest thing, from your perspective probably as Greek readers, is that every word ends with an omicron. Porano, gazigo, abathago, kanago, gogno, poro, odabathago, moyano, lagoko, poro, lisgo, sigo, odabathago, Finz-Lado, kago, sigo, asido, pido, agadago, iono, abo, lisgo, armaheo, etc. It sounds a little bit weird. It sounds very rhymey. You think, well, that can't be right. The purpose of word endings, after all, is to differentiate one word from another and differentiate one syntactical role from another, right? We usually use case endings word endings to indicate case differences, to indicate different conjugations of verbs, things like that. So it's not very much use to anyone if every word ends with the same letter. That can't be right. You can't have a language that works like that. Well, in this case, yeah, it's probably not right. Those omicrons are almost certainly not pronounced. Porano, gaze, abafag, ganago, kana, gog, gun, por, odabafag, moyan, lagok, por, discosig, odabafag, Finz-Lad, kagsig, asidpid, agadag, yan, ab, lizg, armahe, etc. You drop the omicrons. You don't have the omicrons in there. Why are the omicrons even there? I don't know. Nobody's really sure as far as I know. They can be interpreted as the last trace of an earlier case system, which you can see in the inscriptions, which are earlier than a lot of the other written documents we have. In the inscriptions, some words end with iota, some words end with omicron. The words that end with iota are in like accusative, dative, genitive case, what's called the oblique case, anything but the nominative. And the words that end with omicron are in the nominative case. Now that case system stops being used at a certain point, but the omicrons to represent the default case ending sort of stick around. They stay at the end of the words, even though they're not being pronounced. They're basically functioning as word breaks, and this may actually be the graphic function of the omicron for readers of the script during the historical period. You see an omicron, you know the word's over. And this is kind of useful because this is a language that compounds quite a lot. Compounds prepositions with pronominal suffixes, makes compounds out of different words, the names are all compounds. So having some guidance to word and even compound member breaks can be really helpful for reading the language. But so if we see the omicrons function as word breaks, we see that what's written, Finz-Lado, in Greek script, should actually be pronounced Finz-Lad. Finz-Lad. That L in Bactrian script is probably pronounced somewhere between an L and a D, so lad or lad or something like that. And it corresponds to what is a D in the other Indo-Iranian languages. So Finz-Dad is the previous form. And that allows us to start interpreting the name. because Finz in Bactrian means lady, and Dad in the other Persian languages means creature. So the name means lady creature, or lady Dad, lady creature. What on earth does that mean? Other names that end with the lad suffix or the dad suffix are what's called theophoric names. Names that say, I am the creature, I belong to X god. So the lady here, the Finz, is probably a theonym, probably referring to a god. So we could take this as just to take a flyer on this, creature of Anahita, who's probably the most commonly referred to like pan-Iranian goddess, though one hesitates to speculate too wildly about the local religion of Bactria, which differs from Zoroastrianism and from other Indo-Iranian religions in some kind of weird ways. So the idea is that the name says, well, I am the creature of Anahita, I am under Anahita's protection, don't screw with me, or I will make a contract at you, which is actually the document in which we see Finz-Lad's name come up. To return to the question which I raised before, why on earth are fights getting resolved by contracts? Shouldn't one or the other of the people involved in this fight, Pap or Finz-Lad or both, shouldn't they go to jail? Shouldn't the cops be taking care of this? Why are they just making a deal about it? Well, they are living in a cop-free world. Like most people who've ever been alive, there are no cops around to resolve the law for them. And this conflict resolution by contract is one model for how to have law without police, one model among many. One in which you just have, laws for a particular occasion made up by individuals getting together and coming to some kind of an agreement. And the laws take the form of a contract saying we won't fight anymore. And the contract is enforced by social consensus such that if anyone violates it, they do have to pay a fine to the other party and to the state treasury, which is really the only way that the state is kind of intervening here. They're collecting a little money off the top. Now in Bactria, this system is highly developed and remarkably stable over the entire period for which we have Bactrian documents, 700 years. It survives the conquest of the area by the Sasanians, by the Hephthalite Huns, by the Yuezhi, by the Arabs eventually. The province does get Islamized, and eventually that is what leads to the replacement of Bactrian as a written language by modern Persian, which becomes the sort of written language of Bactria in modern times and from the late Middle Ages onward. But this system is remarkably stable, doesn't require state intervention, in fact survives pretty dramatic changes in who's in charge. So, who knows, maybe you should try it with your friends, see what happens. Now, it is possible that we Americans have spent way too much time as kind of neoliberal individual subjects to ever look at a legal system like this as anything but a way to take advantage of other people. But on the other hand, maybe we'd be able to make it work after all. So, like I said, try it with your friends this weekend. Start making your own laws and tell the police to mind their own beeswax.